Well, hello. My name is Lisa, and I'm here today with Thomas, and this is for my YouTube channel, The Road to Reflection. And today I'm going to talk to Thomas and ask him a few questions. And I think he has an interesting story that needs to be told. So, welcome, Thomas. Thank you for coming today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I can. Thank you for having me, Lisa. I was born a long time ago, before dirt was invented,
Hey, me too.
and I was born into a family that participated in the Mormon Church, or commonly referred to as the Mormon Church. They like to be called by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Excuse me. And the youngest of 5 kids. My dad was older when I was born. He was older. He was 42. And
That is older in the Mormon community. Yeah.
it is definitely older. And he's a convert to the church. My mom has pioneer ancestors going back to the 1830s. A great, I don't remember if it's 2 or 3 great grandpas was the jailer for Wilford Woodruff down in Georgia, which is how he got brought into the church.
Claim to fame.
Claim to fame. And I was a very active, devoted young man in the church for all of my life. Well, for up until a certain point, obviously, but for many, many years, over a quarter century.
Yeah. So are you okay if I ask you a few questions and a little bit about your childhood and about your family and your history?
Yes, that is fine.
And then we will talk about maybe your mission if you're comfortable with that, and then get into street epistemology and how that led you to being here today, right now, with me. So, yeah. So can you tell me, like, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Sandy, Utah.
Okay.
I was raised first 5 years in Cottonwood Heights.
Which is
And
relatively where, for people who aren't familiar with the geography?
it is southeast of Salt Lake City, about 10-ish miles from the center of downtown Salt Lake City. Lived there 5 years, and then we moved to Murray, which is I don't know, roughly 7 or so miles south of the same location, Salt Lake City. And I was the only child in my family to spend their entire school life in one school system. I have siblings that had 3 or 4 schools in a year. But I was fortunate to stay in one spot from the time I was 5 to 18.
That's cool. And do you know roughly, like, what the percentage of LDS the population is in that area, at least in your childhood years?
Back in the day, I counted it once. I remember counting it once as a child, and there were, not including the apartments, which are a different story, there were condominiums, apartments, and houses in my ward. And
your ward is just a general congregation.
a geographical area of congregants that meet in one specific building together for church. And I believe I remember counting between the condominiums and the houses, I counted I think it was like 150 houses, and almost every single one of them was on the church rolls. There were maybe 15 that weren't on the church rolls.
Oh, wow.
And so that area was a high density population of adherents to the LDS religion.
So most of your classmates and neighbors and friends were also LDS?
Most of them. I did happen to have some that weren't. Not happen to. I I was friends with many other kids that weren't a member of my church. Um, but the vast majority of my classmates were definitely members of the church.
And your family was active? You attended every Sunday?
Yes, we attended every Sunday.
What about during the week?
During the week, I was highly involved in scout activities. We participated in the Boy Scouts of America. And so once a month, a camp out. And Sundays weren't just going to church. It was, as a young man, go to people's houses and ask them to give money to the church. Go to people's houses with my dad and present a spiritual message to 3 different neighbors throughout the month, every month. And we were very devoted to that. We had
home teaching. Is that
home teaching is what it's called. What it used to be called. I don't remember what they changed the name to.
Ministering.
Ministering, yes. We had like 98% of the time that we went and fulfilled that duty. Yeah, and
that's impressive. A lot of people don't get that high. That's
no, it's
pretty hard to do.
Yeah, it is.
Every month, consistently.
Every month, yeah.
Yeah, check in on the family. So were you baptized?
I was baptized at 8 years old, a month after I turned 8.
What was that like?
I don't have a ton of memories around it. I remember going to the font. I remember it was special because I was sick the day I was supposed to get baptized. So we had to have a special baptism separate from everybody else's. One of my sisters was in, I want to say 5th grade, and had a school, like a state fair project, or not state fair, a report on a state in the United States.
Yeah.
And my mom was buying stuff for her to display with her, some treats to display with her presentation. And then she was also buying treats for me. And I remember telling my sister, Mom loves me more because she bought me more stuff than she did for you. So I don't know that I was necessarily mature enough to actually make a decision to join a church at 8 years old.
That's funny. The thing you remember most are the treats and what your sister was doing.
Yeah. I have a family friend that didn't come, and I was bummed that he didn't come. He didn't want to put his Sunday clothes on again.
Understandable.
And I remember walking down into the baptismal font, a great big bathtub, and I don't remember anything else about it.
Yeah, well, eternal covenants that you are bound to for eternity.
Forever, for at the age of 8, because apparently you're able to make that kind of a decision.
And you'll be reminded of those every week, and
yes,
that you promised to keep those covenants.
Oh, yes.
But the treats are really what it comes down to.
Yeah. The treats were like, I got more than she did.
Yeah, it's something to flex, for sure.
Yeah.
That's not great. How about your teenage years? You stayed involved, stayed active.
Stayed involved, stayed active.
The scout thing.
Every week I was at church. Between the ages of 12 and 18, you have different duties as a man, as a boy. Women don't get to participate in this. The girls don't, but it's something for the boys to do.
Yeah,
and
talk to me a little bit about that.
At 12 years old, you can be given what's called the Aaronic priesthood, and you're given the office of a deacon, which is basically just saying you now have a duty to do work in the church.
I think it's 11 years old now, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Oh, yes. Now the year you turn 12.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Even if you turn 12 in December, when that year starts, is when they can ordain you now. back then, it was when you turned 12. You go in for a bishop's interview, and he asks you questions about if you believe in the church, if you believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet and Jesus is your savior, and if you masturbate, if you look at pornography.
To a 12-year-old kid.
Yeah. And this was back in a time when the internet didn't exist the way it does. I mean, it was unheard of. We didn't even know what the internet was. It existed, obviously, in schools, but we had no clue what it was. And
because it's determining your worthiness to pass the sacrament, and
yes, it determines whether or not you are worthy before God to pass the sacrament, which is the Lord's Supper. It's some bread and water to remind people of their baptismal covenants. And so as a 12-year-old, you're expected to be there every week to pass the sacrament. When you turn 14, they move you along into the office of a teacher, which doesn't necessarily teach anything. You get a few different duties. Technically, that's when you start being a home teacher or a ministering teacher. I actually started when I was 12.
Teacher in title only? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it's in title only. You're not
teaching, right?
No.
Okay.
I mean, you could be called upon to teach, but no, you're not actually teaching anything. It's just
because you're a 14-year-old.
It's just to it's just to make you feel good, right?
Yeah.
Make you feel like you're responsible for something. But when I was 12, I actually started to home teach with my dad because his companion and him they could never get their schedules lined up. So I always just went with my dad. So then when I turned 14, I officially became his companion, his home teaching companion. So that
was your calling then.
Yeah.
You were called to that.
I mean, it's not necessarily, it's not a calling the way it would. So a calling is something where the bishop says, hey, we want you to be a primary teacher, and that becomes your calling. And this is different because it's like the bishop is over the whole ward, and for this it's like the men have their own things that they do. So it's a calling, but it's not like they don't like put their hands on your head and bless you to do the job well. It's they just call you to be
they just say this is your responsibility now.
Yes.
You're doing this.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the other responsibilities you have are to bring the sacrament, so bring the bread to church, and then before church set up the water. So there's a little tiny cup of water, and it gets passed around in trays to all the congregants by the deacons. And so as a teacher, one of your responsibilities is to put water in the cups in the trays. And so every week someone's got to be there to take care of that.
So the deacons pass the sacrament. So this is during the Sunday service every week.
Yes.
Deacons pass, teachers prepare. And then what after that? And then
at 16, as long as, again, like every time you move to the next position, there's another interview, a worthiness interview, where the bishop is asking you about your sex life, which for me was basically non-existent. I mean, I tried to be the best little Mormon boy I could possibly be.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I didn't view pornography from time to time. It happens. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes it just happens because kids are like, hey, look at this. And it happens. And so you're constantly getting these interviews. And then at 16, it's your job to bless the sacrament. So during the church services, you
what does that mean?
The sacrament, you pray over it to ask God to bless it, so that the people that take it can have their sins forgiven them as they've repented of their sins, their crimes against God. And it's like one of the few prayers in the church that has to be exact word for word. So like,
and what if it's not?
if it's not, the bishop or someone in the bishopric, one of his counselors will signal to you, hey, you messed up, you need to do that again. I remember one kid had to say the prayer something like 7 times. And it was, I mean, it's a
And this
huge
is
board.
in front of all the people, the
Oh
little
yeah,
kids, everybody's listening and waiting.
yeah, there's 200, 250 people in the congregation. And my friend was just, he had to say the prayer so many times because he was so nervous. And I remember feeling bad for him and also wondering, like, is he going to be able to get this? Or are we going to have to like have someone substitute in for him? But it was just hard to watch where he was trying so hard and just.
Yeah. How did that make him feel? Did you ever talk to him about that? Like, or did that ever happen to you?
It didn't happen to me. It may have happened once where I got a word wrong once. They give you a cheat sheet so you can read it. And it's kind of a challenge, like, can I have this memorized so I can say it by memory instead of using the cheat sheet? And I recall once I did mess up on a word once when I was repeating it from memory instead of from the cheat sheet. And it was, oh, I missed a word, whatever, big deal. I didn't care.
Right. Not a big deal.
Not that I didn't care, but it wasn't a big deal.
It was just a little slip.
Yeah. For my friend, he was like, oh yeah, that was bad. But he got over it pretty quickly. You know, it was a learning point for him to calm down a little bit. But yeah,
take his time. What do they tell you about being worthy to bless the sacrament?
So the church has this thing called the Word of Wisdom, which is just a set of guidelines that followed information given out by doctors in the 1810s, 1820s, that Joseph said, hey, God told me that we need to follow these things, but not as commandments, more as just, hey, maybe watch what you're doing with these things. And it's been interpreted to mean don't have coffee, don't drink tea, no alcohol at all, which is actually impossible because alcohol exists all over. Like, that's how bread is made. You know, yeast growing is anyway, it's just a silly thing. So abstain from anything fun as far as that goes. No, like the way, and then there's the law of chastity, which has to do with sexual nature, like I mentioned earlier. The way that was given to me was no kissing girls, no single dating. Like, if you want to go on a date, it has to be in a group. You should never single date somebody. And especially before your mission, you should never even consider single dating somebody. It should always be in a group setting. That wasn't necessarily something that they just said you can't move on for that, but it was definitely highly discouraged. And it was mainly, do you touch yourself? Do you look at pornography? Are you having sex with people?
And what if you were to answer yes to one of those? Like, what would be the consequences?
So I did have some times when I did say yes, a couple of times. As a young man, you touch yourself. It happens. You try not to, as a good Latter-day Saint, but every now and then it happens. And as a teenager, it sucks because your hormones are just raging. And it's like, nope, don't touch yourself, because if you do, it's going to be kind of like you committed murder. It's right next to committing murder. So make sure to not touch yourself. And the couple of times that I went in, it was like, Bishop, I touched myself. I'm fortunate where my bishops didn't ask for extreme detail like some bishops do. I read stories all over the place of bishops doing that. Mine were just like, well, what happened? How can we help you not do this? And for the next 3 weeks, month, whatever it was at the time, you need to be in church, and you can't participate in blessing the sacrament or passing the sacrament, and you can't partake of the sacrament.
How did
Or
that
you
feel?
can't have the bread and water. And that is, the shame involved in that is just ridiculously crazy.
Are you sitting with your family?
Oh yeah.
And so
Yeah,
everybody's noticing.
yeah. Well, I couldn't quite get there. So I always took off to go to the bathroom
Mm.
right before the sacrament was passed, because the shame and guilt of having my family see me not partake of the sacrament would have just been too much. My family was very orthodox in their belief system. I have plenty of stories about how orthodox, but
Yeah.
the thought of not participating in the sacrament in front of my parents was just so humiliating. I couldn't do it. So
Public shaming. Yeah.
yeah, the public shaming, and it was just too much. I couldn't handle that.
Yeah. Understood. Ugh. So, sorry, I'm still like kind of stuck on this idea because I participated in these same things as well. So I understand where you're coming from. Tell me about, so you've gone through high school, you're still in the same Utah, highly dense LDS population, getting ready for a mission. What was that like?
So at my high school, we had some 400 kids, students,
Mhm.
and in Utah and some places where the church has a high population, you have what's called release time at the high schools, where instead of going to school, the church purchases a piece of property adjacent to the high school and builds a building where they can teach the kids about the scriptures and about the church. So something like 75% of my high school participated in, it's called Seminary, and 3/4 of my high school or more participated.
Can you describe what seminary is?
Yep, it's
the LDS version.
You have a paid teacher that goes through a church training system to be able to teach church history and church doctrine.
Only in Utah, though, like in California, they didn't get paid.
In other places it's not paid. I know of a few other places where outside of Utah, very few where they were paid.
Maybe Idaho, maybe Arizona.
Maybe Idaho. Where I served my mission in Washington State, there were some paid seminary teachers. But other than there were also plenty of volunteer teachers. So
so here in Utah, they get paid.
In Utah, the teachers are paid. You go during the day. In the morning, sometimes you have like an early morning fireside where they'll get a special speaker to come and talk to you. I couldn't go to those most of the time. I had a jazz band in the morning that we did before school. And so those I couldn't attend, but I attended seminary. I was very into the church. And so you just go and they give you scriptures to memorize. They give you homework assignments that really they're not grading. They more just want you to be there and getting this in your head every day and constantly have the good word of God given to you every day so that you don't go off with and get a girlfriend and have sex with her. One of the reasons. And if you did, that you'll feel ashamed and need to go in to talk with your bishop, whatever.
So this is every day for 4 years, freshman through senior in high school. Plus you're doing the Sunday meetings, plus the scouts or young men's, young women's activities, plus the volunteer visiting families. This is a lot of time spent.
Yes, it's a high demand religion. There's a lot. Plus you're supposed to read, like for seminary, you're supposed to read your scriptures at least X amount of time per day. You're supposed to read the entire book that you're studying throughout the year. So be it the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, the other church scriptures. Like there's a lot that's expected of you, and there's nothing stopping you from just saying you did it,
Mm-hmm,
other
mm-hmm.
than yourself. For the most part, I did it all. I read most of the Bible in high school. I missed a few books here, not books, a few chapters here and there just because I lost my place. I did try to get it all read.
Mm-hmm.
um, I it's very, very active. And then alongside with that, on Sundays, there's a missionary prep course. So you go and some people in your geographical area, from the a larger community than just your ward, so slightly larger geographical area, get together and they teach all the young men, hey, here's the stuff about being a missionary. Here's stuff you got to teach people, and here's
So would this
how
be
to go
for
about it.
the
This
older
is,
teenagers who are getting ready,
yeah, I was
considering a mission?
17. I was
Okay.
17 when this first got brought up.
Missionary
So,
prep class.
mhm.
Okay.
And so, every week, like constantly, there's talk of go on a mission. From the time you're a kid, you're singing in primary for the group for Sundays for kids. You're singing the
Mm-hmm.
song, I hope they call me on a mission someday. It's your desire to, it's put into your head that it needs to be your desire to go out and preach the gospel to people.
Teaching. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
It's a
it,
classic.
it was a constant intent, and I wanted to be the best missionary I could. I had someone in my ward was on his mission. He'd been out a couple of months,
Mm-hmm.
and he got hit by a car and passed away while he was out on his mission. And that just instilled in me an even bigger desire to go out and be a missionary like he was.
Wow.
And so a lot of time, instead of spending time dating, going out with friends and girls, I did plenty of that, but instead of spending as much time as I could have with that, I did spend a lot of time preparing for a mission, constantly reading scriptures, along with, I was in jazz band and pep band and the full orchestra and concert band, and I had a job. So,
Good thing you don't need to sleep. So
yeah, there was a little sleep and a lot of homework and work.
yeah. What did you play? What instrument?
A trumpet.
Oh, cool. How fun.
Yeah.
That's good that you got that experience. So you're prepping for a mission, trying to do all the regular teenage things, but trying to be a good kid. Did you get it sounds like you took it very seriously, and the requirements and the I mean, we had tons of lessons on honesty, right? And telling the truth, and we're told that the bishop can discern when we are not telling the truth. So you might as well just tell the truth, confess your sins.
Yep.
It's kind of fun. So did you tried like sincerely and honestly to do all of that?
Yes, I tried sincerely. Many times. So there were a couple of times. So with masturbation, like it wasn't like the first time I touched myself, like all of a sudden I had to go in and talk with the bishop. It was a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and just try to pretend like it didn't happen. And that would go on for months, like 2 or 3 months, and then be like, nope, too much shame.
And
too
it
much
just
guilt.
weighs
You
you
have to,
down.
yeah, like they're looking at me like they know, and they're just
They know.
waiting for me to come in. And constant lessons. Like, I mean, I can't say for sure how often it came up. Having been a young men's teacher in my later years in the church, it wasn't every week, but it feels as a kid, it feels like every week was a lesson on chastity. It's just what it feels like. I'm sure it wasn't. It's just that's the main thing I remember.
But the hyper focus on sexuality makes it like I think it sticks in these kids' minds so much more than any other kid who's just like, yeah, I did that and I'm done. Now I'm going to play football or whatever. Don't think about it again. And but these poor little LDS kids are carrying around this weight and this guilt and this shame feeling that everybody else knows and they're the only one who's bad. And
No one else is doing this. It's
no,
just me.
yeah, look, everybody else is passing the sacrament and doing their thing. And like, it's just me that has this horrible problem.
Yeah.
And it's not a great system, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
Not.
So I
Go ahead.
graduated high school, and all my friends went off to school. I came from a very indigent family. I didn't even try to get scholarships. I had a hard time studying, being intelligent. Ninth and 10th grade years were bad. I had like a 2.4 GPA for those 2 years. Had a hard time studying and getting grades. 11th grade, I got it together, and I had like a 3.9 GPA, which is almost perfect for all of 11th and 12th grade.
Wow.
But the focus for me wasn't school, it was going on a mission. I needed to earn enough money to go on a mission.
Were you saving, working and saving? Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to, because come from a poor family, like I paid for everything. I paid for my car insurance, my gas. Wow. I bought my trumpet.
That's expensive as for kids,
especially for a kid. 10th grade, I bought $1,000 trumpet. That was a lot of money. I mean, that would today that would be like buying a $5,000 trumpet. Which ridiculous amounts of money. Maybe
for a high school kid.
For a high school kid, yeah.
It's a big deal.
And paid for my own clothes. And the church paid our rent. So I didn't have to pay rent, but like I paid for myself for everything, all my school fees, dances, that I paid for everything that I did. And so not only was I doing that, I was paying tithing. 10% of my money had to go to the church, because like as kids, as youth, we'd go to the temple to be baptized for dead people in the name of dead people. And
a whole another hour of discussion.
And part of the requirements to be able to do that is you have to pay 10% of your earnings to the church.
It's a question they ask you.
Yeah, it's a question that, and if you say no, then you don't get your temple
They'll say, well, go do that and then come back. Yeah.
It happened once. I was like, I've forgotten to pay my tithing for like 2 months, Bishop, and 3 months, something like that.
Yeah.
And he said, well, as long as you promise to start paying it and pay back what you haven't paid, then I'll give you your temple recommend. And at the time something happened, like I had a coworker that called me the next day and was like, Thomas, I'm going out of town for these days. Could you cover my shifts for me?
What a blessing.
Yeah, sure. And guess what? That was just enough to cover
just the exact amount that you needed.
It was such a spiritual experience. Like, oh, this is like, I got these
testimony meeting.
Yeah, she would have asked me anyway. That's just when she asked me.
Right.
Anyway.
And you could have used that money, I'm sure, for life.
Yes. So I was working, trying to pay for everything and save for a mission.
Why was it so important to you to save for a mission? Why was that a focus for you?
It was pounded into me constantly. You need to be a missionary. Every young man must be a missionary was the word from the prophet of God. So like it was something you had to do. It wasn't something that, I mean, it was something I could choose to not do, but how could you choose to not to?
So you want to do it.
And so you want to. Because at least for me, I know I have friends that didn't want to, but I wanted to. I wanted to go out there. I wanted to be a missionary. I wanted to go out and teach people the gospel. And I did that at, like, I have a few co-workers that got baptized that I shared the gospel with at work, at work, and pushing my religion on people. And they were like, yeah, I want to participate. A couple of them got baptized. I went out, along with everything else I did, I would go, when the missionaries would call and say, hey, we need someone to go with us to teach someone. Will you come with? I was always there every single time.
Yeah.
And so that happened on a fairly regular basis. So I didn't go to school after I graduated high school. I didn't go to college. I was working. I worked 4 jobs to try and save enough money to go on a mission.
How much did it cost?
It's at that time it was around like $450 a month, something like that. 400, 450. I don't recall the exact number.
And you can't
Um,
work while you're on your mission,
no,
so you need to save up beforehand enough for the
yes,
2 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I'm not going to school. I'm just working a ton, and during that time, like, so once you graduate high school, you go into college. They change from seminary classes to institute classes. So it's
Mhm.
an institute of religion, and they do the same thing. They buy an adjacent piece of property to the campus and have church during the week.
Mhm.
And I, along with one of my neighbors, we were called to be like the, I forget what the word is, the calling is, but like the head, the student in charge of everything. So you're not in charge of the teachers, but you're in charge of the program. You're in charge of running things, making sure activities happen,
Mhm.
running classes. So we like,
Was building cleaning and maintenance on that too?
not at that time,
Not
not
at
at that time.
before that. It probably
Uh,
is now though, huh?
it very well could be. And so I did that along with the 4 jobs that I had. Yeah, I worked. It was looking back, it was like, man, I dedicated so much time to this.
Yeah.
And then, so here's, yeah, so I just kept working and preparing for the mission.
Oh, you finally get your mission call.
Get the mission call. It's to Washington State, Spanish speaking, Spokane mission.
Okay.
And went in May of 2001. Now I'm aging myself. And yeah, went to the Provo Missionary Training Center for 9 weeks to learn Spanish. Went out to
You
the
didn't speak
field is what they
Spanish
call it
before?
here. I spoke some Spanish. Like I had the
High
Golden
school
Tongue
Spanish.
Award in high school Spanish class.
Okay.
I worked in a Mexican restaurant with a bunch of Mexicans.
Okay.
And so I could speak and understand some. But man, once I got into the MTC, I was like, nope, I don't understand this at all.
So you had to learn a lot.
Had to learn a lot.
Okay.
And then once you get out to actually talk with people that are just your average everyday people, it's even worse. It's like, oh, I've been speaking with these gringos that are highly educated, and it's easy to understand them. But you get out with people that have never been to school, and
Yeah.
they
It's a
talk
different
100
thing.
miles an hour. Their words slur.
So
It was so hard.
what can you talk a little bit about your mission? How did that go? What was it like?
Yep. I worked hard. It was every day going out knocking on doors, teaching people. You know, my first night out, I'd memorized we had 6 discussions that we were supposed to go through, and I memorized them in the MTC, which isn't something they say you have to do, but I'd get up every morning early with my companion and we'd work at memorizing the discussions. And
the MTC is probably another long discussion we
yeah,
could have too.
yeah. So
Missionary Training Center. Yeah.
my first day out there, I'm teaching a family with my companion and I split up, so we had different people from the work come and help us. And the guy that came to help me was an inactive member, but he wanted to become active again. And so they figured the best thing for him to do was go out with missionaries.
Go and teach. Yeah.
Yep. And so he's with me, and it's not to Spanish people, it's to some English speaking people. And I have no idea what these discussions are in English. And so the first discussion that I'm having with them is I believe it was on the law of chastity. It was either it was on the law of chastity. My first discussion with them is on the law of chastity, and in the couple, she's a member, he's not, and they're living together.
Oh boy.
And I'm having to go through this lesson in my head, like translate it from Spanish into English. It was fun.
How was that received?
It was received well. They're the first of like 8 couples that I convinced to get married.
Oh,
Something I don't look proudly upon.
so they're not living in sin.
So they're not living in sin, and he can get baptized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's such a terrible thing to be having sex with somebody. You know, it's, in the LDS religion, it's next to murder. It literally is next to murder.
Yeah, you don't mess around with the sex. That's not
So
okay.
I had some decent success. There were 14 people that I taught that got baptized while I was with them. After I left my mission and kept in contact with some people, there were something like 24 people that I had taught that had been baptized. And then as of 2013, some had passed away, and all but 3 had stopped participating in the church.
Wow.
But by all accounts, I thought I wasn't very successful, because we were the highest baptizing mission in the US at the time, and I only had like 14 during my 2 years. That's not very high. But talking with other people, they're like, I didn't have any. I had 1.
Yeah.
I had 14.
Yeah. So comparatively.
Yeah, and I'm not counting the 9-year-old kid that we baptized, because once you turn 9, you can't just get baptized in your family. Like, you have to go through the missionaries, because you're past the age of accountability or something.
If you're 9, wow.
Yeah. So, so I went through it. I was successful. I know I touched the lives of many people with what I did.
You stayed the full 2 years?
Stayed the full 2 years. And I was kind of a pious prick. I'm not still friends with any of my companions, just because I want to get out there and work. You're lazy. I didn't necessarily say those words, but that's, I'm sure, how it came across. And so who wants to be friends with someone that's like that? No one.
Yeah, you were in it to win it, it sounds like.
Yes, and some of them were there because a girlfriend told them they had to go, or their parents promised them a car, or they promised to pay for college. I didn't have any of that. I was there because I wanted to be there. Now, I didn't manage to pay for the whole thing by myself, but the ward did help out. But I was there because I wanted to be there, and many of the others weren't. And so I look back on it and just go, I could have been good friends with so many of these people, but I'm not, simply because I was so pious.
But did you feel obligated to be pious? Like, it's part of the, you have to take it seriously, right?
Yes,
like, this isn't a game we're playing.
It's not a game. It's not a game of life. It's eternity at stake. And the harder you work, the more blessed you are in life. Constant saying, like we'd been told, the harder you work, the hotter your wife is going to be. What you do now in the mission field will determine how you're going to spend the rest of your life, because you can't ever change after the mission.
Right. It's set in stone. Yeah, do you know why? Like, some people take that seriously, and some people are like, whatever. Like, I'm just here because I need a car when I get back, and my mom's gonna be mad. Like,
it's social pressure. Seriously, it is.
I find that interesting.
Yeah.
The way different people interpret it, but
yes.
But also cool. Okay, so you come back from your mission. You're back in Utah, and what do you do next?
Join a singles ward. What you're supposed to do is get married and have kids, and the best way to do that is to meet other single women.
Yeah.
Right. So join the singles ward, find a job, and date. Only the job that I found was working nights at the same restaurant I'd been at before as the assistant manager.
Okay.
And that didn't lead to a lot of dating opportunities because I was working nights. And the girls that I tried, like there were a few girls I tried to ask out to go on dates during the daytime or at breakfast.
Yeah.
And they thought I was really weird. and it's hard in the culture because you go from being a teenager where it's don't date individual girls, always group dates, to don't date for 2 years, don't even be interested in girls for 2 years,
Pretend they don't exist.
pretend they don't exist, and then immediately upon getting back, okay, now solo date a girl,
No.
like as soon as you can.
Date and get married.
Date and get married. And so it didn't go well because girls are expecting, you know, the normal thing for LDS culture, go on a date at night, and I couldn't do that. And I had a lot of weird looks from people. I did manage to go on a few dates, a lot of rejection. And it was a few years. I'd been home around 3 years, just under 3 years when I started to date the person I married. But I spent all of that time I was going to church. I wasn't as good of a home teacher at the time. I was probably like 70% of the time I was home teaching. I went to Institute when I came home. The Institute program is a 4-year program, and I graduated that 4-year program in 2 semesters. And not only did I graduate in 2 semesters, I graduated with like additional credits. And I took so many Institute courses that I finished the program that quick. So I was highly dedicated to.
So you're still dedicated, you're
furthering my
still
knowledge.
invested, you're still interested at this point. And we haven't even talked about your temple experience, which we can, that's another conversation as well. Like there's so much more to get into. Okay, so what made you, how long was it before you started questioning the church?
So
or what was the trigger there?
It's a long story, and I'm trying to come up with the ways to keep it as short as I can, because there's a lot of nuances, but I'm going to do my best.
It's always a long story. If you're that invested, it has to be a long story.
It has to be, because it's not just one thing drew you away.
Yeah.
So
somebody offended me and then I left. Like that's a short story. And but that doesn't happen.
No. So
anyway, spoiler alert for anybody who's watching. Thomas is no longer in the church.
So
go ahead.
I think it's important to note that I constantly had a calling. I asked my bishops to give me a calling usually. I wanted to be active in the church. And so I constantly had a calling. Where I currently live in the Salt Lake Valley, shortly after I moved in, I was called to be the Deacon's Quorum Advisor. So now I'm teaching these young men that I once was. And I did that for a few years.
Are 12 and 13.
12 years old, 12 and 13-year-olds. Did that for a few years. And then I was called to be the young men's president, which is I'm over all of the teachers that are over all of the boys from 12 to 18, but I specifically teach the 16 to 18-year-olds. And I spent a lot of time, I devoted a lot of time to that. I was working a lot of hours at my job and devoting a lot of time to this. And I wasn't the perfect or best person, but I was devoting as much time as I could to it. I did what I felt was the best I could do.
Yeah.
And so in 2010, in 2010 and 2011, I had a few things happen to me that started this road. One, I was diagnosed with a child's disease that adults don't get.
Mm.
And it's an immune system problem that causes it causes little purpura, they look like zits, only they hurt far worse than any zit. And when you get them as a kid, it happens and it goes away. And 99% of kids, it resolves on its own within a month and they never deal with it again. If you get it as an adult, it can be worse. For me, it was terrible. It created these massive open wounds all over, like 3rd-degree burns.
Wow.
Is what they were compared to, all over my legs and on my feet.
Mm.
And it required a lot of medical support. And then right after that happened, I got hit by an F-650, a very large pickup truck, tow truck.
Whoa.
And herniated a few discs in my back that still haven't healed.
Mm-hmm.
And it resulted in me having to kind of change careers. I was a chef, the executive chef at a catering company. And I tried to keep doing it, and the times I tried to work, I fainted at work 3 times.
Oh, geez.
I decided I just can't do this. And that was due to the back injuries. So I ended up changing careers, but kept working through being an active participant in the young men's program with church. And then the disease is called, at the time it was called Henoch Schoenlein purpura. They've kind of changed it to IgA vasculitis, which is fairly common. It's just this cause for it is not very common.
Huh.
And it
Is it treatable?
It's no, there's not enough known about it to treat it.
Oh.
I participated in a study in 2017 that is still going on because they haven't had enough participants to finish the study.
Great.
And not because that's because there just aren't that many people that suffer from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, and one of the things you have to look out for is like too much stress, be it physical or emotional or mental, like too much stress can trigger an onset. And I'd asked bishops, hey, could I get some help in my calling? I need someone that can do the physical stuff with these boys. I need to watch myself. Yeah. And I was given blessings where they use their priesthood authority, God-given authority, to bless me that I won't have problems and I'll be fine. And I'll
with
be able
consecrated oil.
Yes, and I'll be able to fulfill my calling without problems, right? And I believed it. And they, I'd give names for people to come and be helpers, and every name I gave, they're like, nope, 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 nope. And I don't know why, they wouldn't tell me why, but it was always a no. Mm-hmm. Like, if I can't find people that are gonna come help, like, I'm just gonna have to exercise my faith and make sure that these boys have as good an experience as I can give them. And
well, you were told you would be able to do it, so.
Yes. We had in 2013, we went on a snowshoeing camp out overnight in the Big Cottonwood Canyon and came home from that. We had a weekly basketball game with the young men where it was, all right, can the young men actually beat the old men? And just all this activity led to a point where I had a new onset. And what happens during the onset is your immune system produces too much immunoglobulin, which then kills off whatever it's fighting. Like the first time I had an upper respiratory infection and it destroyed it instantly. But then it doesn't stop producing. It just keeps producing. And then eventually your body says, it says, I got to kill something. And so it hits the extremities. So legs, hands, feet. It can happen in the gut. And this is kind of nasty. So if you're squeamish, stop listening. the blood, the blood leaves the capillaries and veins. It like just pokes its way through, and then it's out in your body at this point. Then it works its way towards the skin, and then it bleeds through the skin, through the pores of your skin.
Yeah.
And so for me, like it, and like I said, for kids that get it, like they have these little zit-like things that happen and they go away. But I had so many spots so close together that it just ate away my skin and muscle. And it was bad. It took me off my feet for many weeks. But I still went to church and taught those boys on Sundays, right?
You're just enduring to the end.
Yeah. And it required going to the hospital and getting treatment, getting wound therapy to get them to heal. It took months. I mean, this second onset happened in March, and it was August before they finally healed. They healed. I went back. They healed. I went on another camp out with the boys. One of my co-scout leaders volunteered to carry nearly all of my stuff on his back on a mile hike. And I was like, hey, cool, I can do this. Yeah. So I went with them, and by the time we came back, I had a new onset. Which is unprecedented. Like, this doesn't happen even to adults. This is unheard of. And like, I'm a specimen every time I go see a doctor. They're like, wait, what? You had that? You have this? I want to see. Like, it's ridiculous.
Novelty.
I'm the only time they're going to see it in their life.
Right. Wow.
And so anyway, had a new onset, and then I just kept having these onsets, and eventually it led to kidney failure. And fortunately, we caught it like right at the beginning. I went on a massive amount of prednisone to stop it, to kind of stop the failure from happening, and that sucked. And I'd never wish prednisone on anyone, but it was ridiculous. I hurt, painful, but it saved my life. Stopped the kidney failure from progressing any further. But it's things that happened during that really started me questioning. Because I'd been given all these blessings where I'd be fine, and fulfilling my calling would keep me protected.
While you're having these major health issues to deal with.
Yes. And
where you physically cannot do your calling.
Yes. So while I was on kidney failure, my nephrologist said, hey, you need to not attend social gatherings because this prednisone completely wipes out your immune system. You have no immune system, period. So, and I said, well, what about church? And she says, well, I don't know. I've never been to church. I was like, oh, well, let me tell you.
Have I got a message for you?
And she said, well, I recommend not going. And I was like, well, I can stand out in the foyer away from everybody and then just go teach my class. And she said, well, if you feel comfortable with that, I recommend against it. But if you feel comfortable with that, then it's
because not going is not an option.
No, not going is not an option. Not rejecting a calling, saying I can't do this, it's not an option. You have to endure to the end.
When basically God has told you that you can do it.
Yes. And so I go into church one of these weeks, and someone in the ward between classes comes up to me and says, Brother Longmore, coughs all over me.
Of course,
I haven't seen you in ages. And I'm going, can I cuss?
Yeah.
Inside, I'm going, what the fuck? Why did you do this?
For real.
I guess I look back on it now, and that's what I think I thought. I probably thought at the time, like, what did you just do? Because cussing isn't an option.
You probably said, what the heck?
Yeah, I probably said what the heck or what the freak.
Yeah.
Which might as well just say the word. So
what the freak.
Yeah. So I I ended up catching an upper respiratory illness without an immune system. It got me hospitalized. And so when I went, and when, like I said, I told the bishop before this, hey, my doctor suggested I'd not come to church. And that was another time when he was like, I promise the Lord will protect you. And
well, he didn't. What's going on here?
So I end up hospitalized. I get out. I wasn't there a long time, but I get out and I went back to him and I said, I'm done teaching. You're going to have to find someone else to teach. I'm not coming back while I'm on this immune suppressant.
Mm-hmm.
And he again tried to convince me to stay. And I said, no, you got to find someone else. I'm not coming back until I'm off immune suppressant. And that really, my faith was just destroyed at the time. Like I still believed, but I was hurting. I didn't know how to process this. Like,
were you trying to balance like I'm getting told this by this, and then but science is telling me, or the doctors are telling me this, and they're conflicting with each other. Why?
And it wasn't even that. It was
yeah, what was
I was promised something and I did everything within my power to do what I should have done, and the promises didn't come true. And a lot of people tell me, like, well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. No, you haven't gone through something like this. This did not make me stronger.
What doesn't kill you just doesn't kill you. And
I may have developed more empathy, but I've always been an empathetic person. Mm-hmm. And so, or most of my life, I've been an empathetic person. Not when I was getting baptized to my sister, but the rest of the, like, I'm typically empathetic. And so, like, what almost killed me did not make me stronger. It made me weaker. And so I'm constantly going, why did this happen? And I'm trying to get things organized in my head, and I'm trying to resolve these internal conflicts, but I can't talk with any about it because you can't talk about your doubts with people.
Right.
Always have to be faithful.
So Thomas, can we pause the story right here for just a second?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if this is just a story you've made up. I have to quiz you for a second.
Okay.
I'm at the DI the other day because I live in Utah. I found this, Zion. It's a trivia game for families. And it was made in 1959. I'm going to ask some of the trivia questions to see if you're legit or you're just faking.
Okay.
So this is the green cards are, where's my cheat sheet? Our miscellaneous category. You down for a couple of questions?
Yeah, let's do this.
Trivia questions? Okay.
We'll see how bad I fail.
In 1959, so this is the answer key for the trivia questions. Some of these are
we don't follow that doctrine anymore from that time period.
I know you can dismiss anything that's not. We no longer teach that. That's been disavowed. Let me find a good one. What language were the gold plates engraved in? In what language?
They weren't, because they didn't exist. No, sorry, Reformed Egyptian. Reformed
Egyptian. Number 4, Reformed Egyptian. That is absolutely correct. And there's a scripture reference that says Mormon 9:32. So you can look it up in your Book of Mormon. But it's spelled Morman. Have you ever seen that spelling?
I have.
Oh, I have not. Okay, you pass. Good job. You do. Couple more. What city was Joseph Smith the mayor of?
Nauvoo.
I think that sounds right to me. Nauvoo, Illinois. Yep, Illinois. Oh, here. I think this is still taught. What is the planet nearest the residence of God called?
Kolob. Can't you?
Who doesn't know that? Do they still teach that? Oh, it's in Abraham, the Book of Abraham. 3:5. Yeah, okay. So you know these things. Who was commanded by the Lord to select sacred hymns for the church?
Emma Smith.
31. I think that sounds right. And it is Emma Smith, and that's in the Doctrine and Covenants,
Yep.
section 25. Yeah. Let's see. What is the new and everlasting covenant? This will be the last one.
Oh,
that doesn't make sense.
I was going to say there's a lot of things that answer could be.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with a lifeline. No, let's celestial marriage.
The new, that was my guess too. The new and everlasting covenant. The answer in the answer key is the fullness of the gospel.
Of course, they go for the overarching answer.
Yeah, I guess. So we can look that up later in Doctrine and Covenant section 30, section 66.
Yeah.
Okay, good job. So you're legit. This isn't just a made up story. Some of these questions are fantastic, though. I love them.
Oh, I'm sure they are. Hopefully, there's none from Mark E. Peterson on there.
Yeah. So you should get a prize. I'll come up with a prize because you did really well. Okay, so you're having these health issues. Let's get back to Thomas's story. Health issues, questioning why are things not working out as promised.
Yeah. So that's early 2014 is when that happened. It was when I got hospitalized. December of 2015, one of the boys that I had been a teacher for when he was a 16, 17, and 18-year-old kid went on a mission and came back. And I was asked, I didn't attend a lot of church at the time, simply because I still was worried about my immune system. And when I did attend, I stayed away from people still. And I stopped partaking of the sacrament because I felt like you needed to really believe to honestly partake of the sacrament. And I didn't know, I was trying to reconcile all these things.
So you weren't sure if you even believed?
Well, no, I believed. Wow. I just had a hard time reconciling all these things.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so it was affecting my faith.
So you're trying to reconcile in your head.
Yes. And so I'm asked to speak when he comes home from his mission with him. And I'm asked to speak on Christ-like attributes. And while I'm studying, I skipped over 500 things that happened during this time. But while I'm studying for this talk, I realize, what I'm feeling is I'm hurt by the church, not by the gospel. I'm hurt because I wasn't treated the same as other people. And that's really my problem. And I went from trying to reconcile all these problems to, I'm back in, baby. Let's go. Let's do this thing. And I gave my talk and everything's good. And I'd let my temple recommend lapse, and I'm ready to go back. Like, we go into tithing settlement where I have to tell the bishop, yes, I've given the church 10% of all my money. And I'm ready to ask his assistant, his secretary, to schedule me an appointment to get my temple recommended back. And we're in there meeting with him, and the poor guy had a heart attack a few months prior.
And just for clarification, the temple recommend is the card that they give you. It's a little piece of paper card that says you are allowed to go into the temple.
Yes.
Okay, go on.
And so I asked him, so he'd had a heart attack a few months prior, but he's already back up to doing everything he was doing before the heart attack. And while we were meeting with him, he said, because of my calling, the Lord protected me and kept me safe. And
what now?
I'm still, we're almost a decade later, and I'm still reeling from the effects of what I've gone. And here's him, God protected me because of my calling. And I just went, wait, was my calling not important enough? I'm helping these young men prepare to go on missions, to go teach the gospel to people.
Yeah.
And I acted in faith.
With promises.
Why am I not deserving of these blessings? And in 10 seconds, I went from a fully believing I'm all in to, does the God I've been worshiping my whole life exist? And I can't say anything because you don't talk about your doubts
Right.
in the church. Like, expressing doubts is a no-no. And we leave and we're on the way home, and my wife says something about how wonderful what something he said was. And I just went, I can't tell her what I just went through because she's not going to see it that way. She's not going to understand it.
Yeah.
And so for the next many months, I went about with this in my head, and just like, and it destroyed me. It utterly destroyed me. I didn't, but I couldn't do anything about it. I just physically couldn't, because it was making me sick to my stomach to think that this God couldn't exist, and that this whole plan was not true. And so I went months just trying to work through things, and still trying to figure out a way to believe.
Why is that such a big deal to confront that thought?
You're lazy if you don't, like, the church teaches that you're lazy if you don't believe. If you decide to leave, you've done something lazy. You could have done more. You were just too lazy. If you don't make it to the big heaven, the best heaven, because there's many heavens in Mormon, like there's different levels of heaven. And if you don't get to the top one, it's like being in hell, because you could have done better, but you didn't do enough. And so it was just like, how can I don't know how to do this. But I kept praying with my wife. I didn't go get the temple recommend. I could not lie my way through that. There's no way I could have. And then I just wrestled with this for a long time. And then I don't know how much to get into here. I eventually got to a point, the stress of my wife not knowing was going to kill me. Like, it hurt so bad. And I had to pull her aside and say, look, I don't believe. And she's like, well, why haven't you told me? It's like, well, everyone that I know except for one person, when one spouse leaves the church, it means a divorce happens. And I don't want to be divorced from you. And she's like, well, why have I ever even indicated that would possibly happen? Well, no. Well, why couldn't you tell me? And she was hurt that I felt I couldn't tell her.
Yeah.
But we got that out of the way. We got it done with.
Did you procrastinate telling her for a long time?
Oh, yeah. So this was December of 2015 when I had this experience at Tithing Settlement, and this was March of 2017.
Okay, long time.
So it's been
over a year.
Yeah.
But you're just holding on to this.
During that time, the Elders Quorum, which is a group of men in the church, came to me and said, hey, we want you to come teach Elders Quorum lessons, because you have gone through things in your life. You understand things. You have empathy. You have a way of presenting things that other people just can't get across, which is what I've been told by the parents of all the boys I've taught. Nearly all of them, their parents have come to me and said, or I've heard they've told my spouse, you were so instrumental in our boys becoming who they are, and they've looked up to you their whole lives. And so, and I told them I don't believe, and they said, well, we don't care. We want you to come teach anyway if you're willing to. I said, well, I'll look over the lesson, and if I feel I can teach something from it, I will. And they agreed to it. They said, okay, that's fine. And boy, that really cemented some things in me during that time, because I would, like, I can't teach the whole lesson. I just can't. And I told them I'm not going to bear testimony. I can't. So I'd read through the lesson. I'd find one paragraph that was like, be honest. And I'd present a half-hour lesson on honesty. And I'd turn to sources outside the church, which is a no-no. And man, people would come up to me and just, Thomas, that was the best lesson I've had. And I don't know if they were told, like maybe the elders quorum president told someone, hey, he's having a hard time, go tell him how good the lesson was. Like, I don't know. I doubt it. I don't see him doing that. He's a really good guy. I don't see him doing that. And these people are really
That
good
does
people.
happen, though.
But it could happen. I don't think it did, because there was one day every single person was like, man, that was an amazing lesson. That was just awesome.
Mhm.
I felt the spirit so strong, which made me go, what? Because before the lesson, I was watching a rated R movie, which is a big no-no in church. Like, you can't have the spirit. There was cussing, there was violence, there was sex, and you can't be doing something like that and have the spirit with you.
That would have driven the spirit
Would
away.
have driven the spirit of God away. And I was like, okay, something's messed up here. But I still just kept going. And then I had an unprecedented 5th onset of my vasculitis in 2017.
Wow.
It just doesn't happen this way to people. I was down at, fortunately, I was at a point at work where I could work from home with my employer. So I was able to be at home with my legs up and work. But during this time, I went, I really want to get my testimony back. I miss the way I felt. I miss the way things were. And I tried. And to try, I went, you know what, I'm just going to start studying stuff from the beginning. And I went online and I was like, Bible courses. And I found one from Yale University. And there was a free course. Like, you can go to the school and pay for it, but you can take it online for free.
I love when they post those. Yeah.
This is awesome. So I start to take it, and they get to Noah and the flood in the Old Testament. And she says, now I want to show you something else, another, some mythology from the area. And she's explained a bunch about it. And it was the Epic of Gilgamesh,
Right.
talking about his flood. And I just went, wait, this is the exact same story. Like, almost the exact same story. And but it was older, and they had a thriving society when the church has determined the flood of Noah would have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so it blew my mind. I went, this is crazy. And then we kept going, and we get to Isaiah, and she starts to talk about Deutero-Isaiah, where there's more than one author to Isaiah. And at the time, I'm thinking, wait, what? Because Isaiah is huge in the Book of Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they quote from him all the time. And like, there's entire chapters that are quoted. And then she talks about, like she said, these chapters, due to these things, we are confident, scholars around the world are confident that this is not one person, that this was written after this year. Yes. And I went, but the Book of Mormon, which is told its history, has those records, and those people left Jerusalem after that time period. They can't have possibly had this. What's going on here?
The math doesn't work out.
And the whole lesson, everything she'd bring up, almost everything was like, this contradicts with the history I've been taught in the church my entire life. Oh. This can't be. And so I started, like, I didn't, and then, like, I looked for a few things on the Book of Mormon, and I found a Google, or a presentation given by someone, I think his name was Christopher, and they used Google to analyze words and phrases, and they found that, like, the Book of Mormon was highly influenced by these books, because entire phrases match what's in the Book of Mormon. And I was like, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. But that's really all I got into in Mormon research. The rest of it, because I was like, well, start with the Bible. The Bible is the original thing.
So, source of Christ.
This is ridiculous. Like, it can't be true for all these, a myriad of reasons. And then if my spouse said, hey, can I tell these friends? I was like, yeah, sure, tell them. And they came over, and we were talking, and I was presenting some stuff to them, and they said, well, it sounds like you're just Oh, and sorry, reading through the Bible again as an adult, having gone through hell myself, I read it and I went, this isn't love. You can't love someone and command them to be tortured. You can't, like, this God of the Old Testament that was a hellfire and damnation God, like, that's not love that at all in any way, shape, or
For
form.
their own good. It's for
Yeah,
their benefit. It's
yeah, it's
AKA abuse. Yeah.
yes. And I just went, this is sick. I can't believe I ever thought this was good. And as I was presenting these things, the neighbor was like, you sound like you're just repeating a bunch of stuff you've heard people say online. I was like, no, I read this. I mean, yes, I'm repeating this Deutero Isaiah stuff in Gilgamesh because I heard someone say it, and I went and read the books that have been written about it. So yes, but no, like, this is me reading it and going, this is disgusting. How did I not see this as disgusting before? And but her saying you sound like you're just repeating stuff people said online made me go, so who else has said this? So now I want to know.
Right.
So I go back online to Google.
Yeah.
And I've and already at this time it's cemented in my head, this is a lie. It's all fabrication. It's all mythology. As an individual, you can cherry pick from the readings and find something good, but it's all myth. It's all mythological, which some myths are based on some history, but it's all mythological. And I tried to see it as metaphor. I couldn't, because the only way that Noah and the flood can be a good metaphor in my mind is Noah was a rat bastard for warning people of impending flood, and then saying, I warned you, stay off my boat.
Right.
Like, that's beyond not love. That's disgusting to do. And so I had already been I'd already gone, this is bad, and I can't believe this at all in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I tried various ways to do it, and I got into the New Testament and things got worse. Things were just as bad. They got worse, in fact, for Mormonism once I got into the New Testament. But I got online and I found there's a whole bunch of people that had the same questions as me, which one of them was the CES letter, and it was like, oh, this guy mentions everything I mentioned about the Old and New Testament, which is why my friend was like, you sound like you're just repeating stuff that you heard someone else say.
Yeah.
He brought up the same issues with that history. And so anyway, just it went.
Can you say what the CES letter is for anybody who might be listening? And
yeah, the CES letter is a member of the church wrote a letter to the church educational system director saying, hey, here's these problems in the scriptures. It's based on Mormon theology and Mormon history and Mormon truth claims. Please help me reconcile them. In addition, on top of those, here's church history problems that need to be reconciled. And because it looks like the church has been lying or hiding truth from its members about these things, and we need answers. And he gave it was a brief overview. His intent wasn't to describe everything in detail. His intent was to say, we need answers for these things. And so that's what the CES letter is.
And if anybody happens to be listening or watching, it's Jeremy Runnels that wrote this document, and you can buy it. You can find it online.
Yeah, cesletter.org.
.org.
Yeah.
It does overview a lot of those issues.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
So
yeah, go on.
So once I start to dive down all these rabbit holes, I started to read the apologists. I didn't know what apology was. I didn't know what all apologetics was at the time. I had no clue I'd participated in it. And I'm reading the apologists' reasonings for stuff, because it turns out during this time, the church had put out a bunch of essays that they didn't exactly say, hey, go read these essays. They just published them and quietly put them on the website. And it was like, this is reading the apologists' stuff. I just went, this is ridiculously stupid. And like a child could dismantle half of this. They're just trying to appeal to people that are trying to believe, that don't doubt too much yet. And they're just trying to assuage their mind. And if they don't take a deeper look into it, a deeper thought, and question how they came up with that answer, they're going to just keep believing because it feels good. And that really got me thinking, so what else do I need to ask myself about all of my belief systems that I've been given my whole life? What else do I need to ask myself? Why I believe it? How come I believe it? And is there something better out there?
And I think, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, this is like now you're on your path to Street Epistemology and coming to our meetup group, right?
Yes.
This is a direct tie-in, I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, so continue.
So I've been trying, so I'm constantly going through introspectively on why do I believe this? What information can I find on it? What presentations are there? What scientific studies are there? Because the fact is, you can have, like, science is so good that you could destroy it all, but save the scientific method. And in 1,000 years, you'd have all of the same answers because it all leads to that response. And whereas what I found with religion is it's all up to what you want to believe about what something says. It's all about what makes you feel good, which turns out isn't a good way to determine truthfulness. You know, there's pedophiles that feel good about being a pedophile. And so it's not just what makes you feel good. And so constantly asking myself, you know, what do I need to change about myself? What do I believe? And how did I come to that belief? And if it's not, if a lot of the times it was, well, I don't like how I came to that belief, so I need to study more about this subject. And so I'd study more, and my understanding of things have changed over time drastically. And I didn't have any kind of community outside of this, outside of church anywhere, because that was my life. It was what I was dedicated to. And sometime in, I think it was in 2019, late 2019, I had a friend say, hey, like I wrote a blog and said, hey, here's my experience, here's my story. And I had a friend say, or a cousin say, hey, you should have some people, like go onto these blogs or Reddit and have people read it and see if they think you should make any changes to flow, or if it's understandable. And wait, there's online groups of people that talk about this stuff
openly.
And so I did that, and I found a bunch of groups, and the online support has been fine for a while. But I just needed some in-person stuff, and so I started to look for, okay, what is there something I can meet up with other people and talk with them about stuff? I don't want something like having a hard organized structure of every week go and listen to a presentation, and like that's hard to do when it might not be something I'm interested in. And so I found a couple, and then I found some podcasts. Somebody suggested I listen to Mormon stories. I started to listen to a little bit to Mormon stories, and through that I found a guy in England that has a page called Priesthood Dispatches. And he actually interviewed you, I don't know, earlier this year sometime.
And a couple months ago.
And
that was fun.
I was listening to your presentation on Street Epistemology, and I went, well, that sounds good. I mean, I've heard it mentioned on Mormon Stories. I've heard it mentioned a few other places. I want to learn more about it. And so I looked up some more about it, and then I went, and before I finished the podcast or the interview, I looked up some stuff. And then at the end, you said, oh, I'm in Salt Lake City and we meet twice a month or something to that effect. And I went, in Salt Lake?
That's so close by.
And so I looked for the group and I went, all right, I can do that. And while it is something that's organized and there's a presentation, it's not exactly a presentation going to these classes with you. It's more of a learning opportunity to be introspective, to seriously ask questions of yourself.
How many meetings have you come to now?
I've been to 2.
Only 2.
I wished I could have come to more, but
life,
you know. So I look up to you and how you can be dedicated enough to constantly have these classes. I think it's a great thing to do. And so so, and really what drew me to it is it seems like it's a great way to talk with people without with the hopefully to not result in a fight or an argument or painful feelings, because religion, like I think back on when I was a religious person and it was such a part of my life. It was completely who I was.
It's your identity at your core.
It was my identity. And if anybody challenged the religion, they weren't just challenging the religion, they were challenging me as a person.
It's personal, yes.
And
you feel personally attacked if somebody says something negative about this gospel, which is everything to me.
And what I found is oftentimes it's not even that I'm saying something negative, it's that I'm saying what actually happened. It just it doesn't feel right. It feels wrong. But when you actually look at what it says and not just the floofy parts, when you actually look at the whole picture, it's actually very terrible and disgusting. And so when you hear those parts, it makes you feel bad, and it should. But the fact that it feels bad isn't because I'm putting it in a bad light. It's because it's actually you going, oh, this is bad. And it doesn't feel good. And so it's internalized as an attack. And from what I'd seen of street epistemology, I went, this is something I can hopefully use to learn, be able to have conversations with people, not necessarily to have them question what they believe, but question how they got there. Because what you believe is whatever, but how you got there, is the reasoning you took to get to that belief logical? Is it fallacious?
That's exactly what I love about street epistemology, is just asking the questions. Do you feel like you kind of use street epistemology type questioning on yourself to figure out where you were?
Yes, I definitely did.
Now that you know.
Not between 2015 and 2017, but once I started to dive in and wanted to get my faith back, that's when it really started.
And it became important to you to have good reasons to believe, to hold on to the belief?
Yes.
Is that what it was?
Yes, not just, because oftentimes, like, faith is often described as believing something that's unseen. In the time I've been out of the church, I've realized that it's not just believing in something that's unseen, it's believing in something in spite of contradictory evidence. And so I've realized, and faith is based off of feelings. And so I got to a point, it was like, I need to have good arguments, good reasoning. I didn't know what fallacies were. I had no clue in 2017 what fallacies were.
Right.
It wasn't until later in the year that I even knew what a fallacious argument was. And I mean, I'm in my 30s and I'm just barely learning what a fallacy is. But
I was in my 40s.
Okay. So, and so I really questioned how did I get here? What brought me here? And is that a good enough reason?
Yeah. And here you are.
Yes, now here I am.
Yeah. How do you feel about the overall journey and using street epistemology kind of on yourself to get to where you are now?
Using it on yourself is very painful. When the religion or the ideology, because it's not just good for religion, it's good for any ideology. When the ideology is who you are it's your identity, as we mentioned. Asking these kind of questions of yourself is not a simple thing. It's not easy. It's not an easy road at all. It's the most difficult road I've ever taken in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've not had an easy life, as I've described tiny bits of it.
Yeah. You can't sum it up in an hour.
No.
Like the
And
whole.
so, but at the same time, it's been highly rewarding because I've learned more than I ever knew before.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also learned, like, so it's questions of not why is it not fair? Why is this or that not fair? It's more of, or is there a better way to, I'm jumbling here. I'm trying to
Oh,
not be poke at people. There was recently a fireside by a church authority saying, hey, why are we asking this question? Why are we asking why didn't the blacks in the church have the priesthood until 1978? Why aren't we asking why didn't the whites get the priesthood until Joseph Smith? And
I heard about that.
so you've got that. And really that's you have to look at that and ask yourself, would I say anything like that? Have I ever said anything like that?
Right.
I'm not worried about being called a bigot or a racist. I'm worried that things that I do from my upbringing in the church are bigoted or racist or misogynistic.
Right.
Because
Unknowingly.
Without realizing it, I don't want to do that. So I don't care if someone calls me that. My concern is I don't want to do that. So if someone does call me a racist or a bigot or a misogynist, I really want to know, because my whole life was spent in a men are greater than women.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not that was actually taught of the pulpit, it's the actions that were taken. It is very evident in the church that men are.
The words are very nice. The
Yes,
actions are
yes,
don't match up. They're incongruent.
Yeah. And I mean, my parents are older. They're from well before they were adults before segregation was done away with legally.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they come from an older generation, and that doesn't mean they're racists or bigots, but they were also part of the church, and you can't help but have church teachings meld into what you do. And so it's always what am I doing that is racist or bigoted, and what can I do to change that? And I think that's kind of whether or not you use street epistemology on other people, I think the most important thing you can do when you get into it is use it on yourself.
Yeah.
And try and figure out why you do things and if there's good reason for why you do things.
Yeah. I have two more questions and I'll let you go.
Okay.
Or I'll let you say whatever you need to say still. One of the questions is, what do you think about the two street epistemology meetings that you've been to so far? Like, is there anything that you would like to see differently or do better, or something you liked or didn't like? Just like a little evaluation.
I like the process of we've gone in and discussed what you can do to make questions. I really enjoy getting in and actually practicing on each other and seeing that this isn't something that's just for religion. It's definitely something that can be used for any ideology. And I love that we have a group of placards on the table of ideas or thoughts, beliefs that we can challenge. Hard part for me is coming up with something that I hold as a claim, that I want to make as a claim, which in our last meeting, after a bunch of talking, I went, oh, you know what? I do have a claim, but there is this claim I can make. And so we did this.
It is hard to come up with claims. That's generally the tricky part.
Yeah. And so as far as making it better, I mean,
Snacks, maybe.
The only I was going to say
Donuts.
snacks. You can't go wrong with snacks.
Who doesn't like brownies?
No, I wouldn't expect you to provide snacks to that. You're already donating a lot of time to it.
The young women president in me is always like, "What? Should I grab some cookies on the way?" I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I have to like fight myself not to do that.
The chef in me is
Yeah.
always, I should bring food to this.
I don't even know if food is allowed in the library meeting rooms.
Yeah.
No.
So
Okay.
as far as what can improve it, I really think maybe if we can find a way to fit in, and maybe you have in other meetings, like I said, I've only been to 2, but
Yeah.
fitting in more opportunities to have to practice the street epistemology,
or practice conversations. Yeah.
for practice conversations. I think because really, like, you're scared to participate because I don't know what to ask, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say.
Yes. It's
So
kind
really
of intimidating at first, isn't it?
Yeah, and so maybe give someone the opportunity to not have a 10-minute street epistemology. Maybe give them an opportunity for like a 3-minute or 4-minute.
It's a quick version.
A real quick version.
I like that idea.
Kind of get your feet wet.
Just practice a little mini conversation.
Yes, because I've had, for myself in religion, I've been studying this deeper than I ever have in my life. I studied tons as a kid and as a 30 up into my 30s, but I studied it even more since, and so I'm very well versed in apologetics and responses to apologetics.
Yeah.
Not every apologetic, and I'm not some great thinker. I don't claim to be. It took me a long time to even realize that Jesus is Santa for adults. But
I don't think any of that matters for street epistemology.
I don't think it does.
It's just about the questions.
It's just a matter of being able to get into the questions. So because I've got plenty of stuff I can say, but how do I ask the questions of other people? And so I think that would help. I think that would help people.
Yeah, I like that idea. Okay, and my last question for you is, do you have any future plans with street epistemology? Or what are your goals for coming up?
For now, my goals are to continue to attend. I want to see if I've tried to invite a few people, a few neighbors to come out. Lives are busy.
Yeah.
Because I think the more people that we can get using street epistemology, the better we'll be as a society. Because when we question what we do and our actions, we have a good chance to grade ourselves, unbiased, hopefully unbiased. I mean, there's always a bias, but as unbiased as possible.
Try to minimize it when you can.
And because, like, we can look back on the decades past and say, oh, it was bad that they had slaves in the past. And the apology for that is, well, we can't judge the past by today. And really, I think we have to judge the past by today, because we will never progress if we don't. And after we've judged the past by today's standards, we have to judge ourselves by other standards. What are we doing now that in 200 years people are going to look back on and say, that was crazy, why were you doing these things? And so what can I do as an individual to move forward? And I think helping people understand the introspection that street epistemology can give them is a great step in that process. So I'd like to bring more people out and introduce more people to street epistemology. I'd love to go out into like parks and whatever to do what Anthony, I forget his last name, does on YouTube. Yeah. But I'm still reeling from these health effects. My immune system is suppressed.
Mhm.
right now, because otherwise I'd be dead.
Right.
And
So you gotta
so
be extra
I
cautious.
do. I don't know if you notice, I kind of sit back from people. I try to sit away from people because,
Mhm.
for the most part, people try to, especially after COVID, people try to pay attention and not go out when they're sick. But it still happens. And so I
It
try to
does, yeah.
sit away from people, stay back, because it is a constant worry. It's something I always have to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's always Zoom, and I don't know if you're
Yeah.
on Discord, but the Street Epistemology Discord server is very active, and they do a lot of practice conversations from people all over the world. So you might be able to get some Spanish speaking practice in there if you are into that. But
Nice.
yeah, so you can check that out, and you can always do lots of things. So I'm looking forward to seeing where you take this. If you have any future plans, and bring people in and be a good missionary for Street Epistemology. I've been accused of reverse proselytizing
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
for atheism, and like for
uh-huh.
me, that's not what it's about. I'm not trying to create atheists, but
No.
I would love to spread the ideas and the tools of street epistemology, just because I think it's a good way to think about life and to try to analyze, why am I doing this? What am I doing here? Is this something I want to continue doing? And why? And just
Yeah.
asking ourselves these questions is super, super valuable. So I appreciate your time today. You've been more than generous with your time. This has been really interesting for me. What final thoughts do you have? Anything you'd like to add?
Oh, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die.
Amen. Yeah,
No,
life should be fun, right?
life should be fun. Treat people with empathy and love.
Hmm.
Uh, that's really, like, figure out a way to talk with people without fighting, without um, feeling personally attacked. If
Yeah.
something gets questioned, and ask better questions that aren't hurtful questions, but that still challenge who we are.
Yeah, I like how you said that, with empathy and love, like, and ask them questions instead of having some kind of other agenda or goal for them to be different.
Yeah, I don't want people to be different. I just want them to think. And if thinking helps people be different, then great.
Great.
If
Yeah.
it doesn't, if their thought process still leaves them where they are, okay, but still have some love, have some empathy.
Mhm. It's their
People
choice to make.
people aren't the same. We all come from different backgrounds, and that have influenced who we are and how we act.
Yep, yep. And we just are where we are. Like, we can't change other people, but they could change themselves if they wanted to,
Yep.
when they're ready. If Yeah, and that's not my goal, and it sounds like it's not your goal
No.
to change people, but just the empathy and love. I love that. That's absolutely beautiful. So thanks for joining me today. I'm like kind of sad here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
It's been really interesting. So I appreciate it, Thomas, and I look forward to seeing you at the next Street Epistemology meeting here in Salt Lake City.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
seeing you more involved. I'm going to end the recording here, if
Okay.
that's okay. Where's that? Right there.